The rain had not stopped for 3 days when Elena Voss finally decided to go back. She stood at the edge of the forest that marked the border of redwood territory, her heart pounding harder than it had in 3 years. Behind her, 2 small figures huddled under a shared blanket, their eyes wide and curious despite the storm. Arya and Cain were only 2 years old, but they already sensed that something important was happening. Children like them always did. "We're almost there," Elena whispered, more to comfort herself than them. Just a little further. She had sworn she would never return to this place. 3 years ago, she had been the pack's most trusted healer, respected by everyone from the youngest pup to the Alpha King himself. She had loved Damian Cross with a quiet, steady love that had grown over years of friendship before it ever became something more. And then, in a single night, everything had been taken from her. Marcus, the Alpha's beta, had planted false evidence, suggesting Elena had shared pack secrets with a rival group. The proof was convincing enough that even Damian, grieving and confused, had not stopped her banishment. She had left without telling him the one truth that might have changed everything. She was carrying his children. Now, 3 years later, Elena had no choice but to return. A group of rogue wolves had begun hunting unclaimed shifter children, seeking their blood for dark rituals that were rumored to extend life unnaturally. Arya and Cain's wolf abilities had emerged early, stronger than anything Elena had ever seen in children their age. They were not safe alone anymore. She needed protection, and there was only one place strong enough to offer it. As she stepped past the old stone markers that framed the pack's border, guards on patrol immediately went still, their noses lifted, catching a scent carried on the wind and rain. One of them, a young wolf named Tobias, felt his chest tighten with disbelief. "That scent," he murmured to his companion. "That's impossible." He had grown up hearing stories about Elena Voss, the healer who vanished after a terrible scandal. But the scent, drifting from the 2 children beside her, carried something unmistakable, something that ran deeper than mere shifter blood. It was the scent of the Alpha bloodline, pure, unmistakable, undeniable. Word spread faster than the rain could fall. By the time Elena reached the edge of the packhouse courtyard, dozens of wolves had gathered, drawn by whispers, and the news that seemed too extraordinary to be true. As she walked forward, holding both children close, something ancient stirred within every wolf present. It was instinct passed down through generations, a recognition of true heirs that could not be denied or explained. One by one, they began to kneel. It started with Tobias, who dropped to one knee the moment the twins passed him. Then an older wolf beside him did the same, and then another, until the entire courtyard was filled with bowed heads and lowered eyes. Even the pack's fiercest warriors, wolves who answered to no one but the Alpha King himself, found themselves kneeling before 2 small children who did not yet understand what was happening. Elena stopped walking. Her hands trembled as she looked around at the sea of bowed heads. She had expected shock. She had expected questions, perhaps even suspicion. She had not expected this. The doors of the packhouse opened. Damian Cross stepped out into the rain, and the moment he saw Elena, the entire world seemed to stop for him. 3 years of grief, confusion, and buried anger rose to the surface all at once. He had mourned her disappearance in silence, believing she had betrayed him, yet never quite able to convince his heart of what his mind insisted was true. But it was not Elena's face that stole the breath from his lungs. It was the 2 children beside her. He did not need anyone to tell him. The moment his eyes met theirs, something inside him recognized what his pack had already sensed. These were his children. His blood, his family, hidden from him for 3 long years. "Elena," he said, his voice rough with disbelief. "Are these—" "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady, despite the storm raging around them, and the storm raging inside her heart. "These are our children, Damian. Arya and Cain." For a long moment, no one moved. The rain continued to fall, but it was as though time itself had paused to allow this moment to settle into place. "Why didn't you tell me?" Damian finally asked, though there was no anger in his voice, only aching confusion. "I tried," Elena said, "but by the time I discovered I was carrying them, I had already been cast out. I didn't know if you believed the lies about me, or if you would have wanted me gone regardless. I was alone, scared, and I had to protect them the only way I knew how. Damien's jaw tightened. He looked past her, toward the kneeling pack, toward the undeniable truth written across every bowed head, and then back to the children who watched him with the same curious brown eyes that Elena had always had. "Come inside," he said quietly. "All of you. Now." Inside the pack house, away from the rain and the watching eyes, Damien knelt before his children for the first time. Arya, braver than her brother, reached out and touched his face with small, careful fingers. "Are you the Alpha King?" she asked. Damien felt something in his chest crack open, warmth flooding through years of carefully built walls. "Yes," he said softly, "and you must be very brave to have traveled so far in this storm." Cain, quieter than his sister, simply leaned into his father's side, as though some part of him had always known where he belonged. Elena watched the scene with tears she no longer tried to hold back. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of raising 2 children alone, hiding their true nature, running whenever danger came too close. Seeing Damien with them now, gentle and overwhelmed with love, made every difficult night feel a little less heavy. But there was still the matter of the truth that needed to be uncovered. Someone had orchestrated her exile, and Elena intended to make sure the truth came to light. The next morning, Damien called for a gathering of the Pack Council. Marcus stood among them, his expression carefully composed, though Elena noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted toward the door, as if searching for an escape that did not exist. 3 years ago, Damien began, his voice carrying easily across the room, Elena Voss was exiled from this pack based on evidence presented by my beta, Marcus. That evidence suggested she had shared confidential pack information with a rival group. I want to know, in full detail, how that evidence was gathered. Marcus straightened, his composure remaining intact. The evidence was clear, Alpha. Documents, witnesses. Witnesses who have since left the pack, Damien interrupted. Documents that were never independently verified. I trusted your judgment then, Marcus, because I had no reason not to. But 3 years is a long time to reflect on decisions made in haste. Elena stepped forward. I never betrayed this pack, she said, her voice steady, despite the weight of the moment. I loved this pack. I loved my work as a healer. And I loved your Alpha. I would never have done anything to endanger any of it. The room fell silent, every eye turning toward Marcus, waiting for his response. For a moment, it seemed as though Marcus might maintain his composure, might continue to insist on his innocence. But something in the weight of the room, in the presence of the twins standing beside Elena, in the memory of an entire courtyard kneeling before children he had tried to erase from existence, seemed to break through his carefully constructed defenses. I did it to protect my daughter's future, Marcus finally admitted, his voice quieter than before. I believed that if Elena remained close to you, my daughter would never have a chance to become your mate, to secure a stronger position for our family within the pack. I fabricated the evidence. I paid witnesses to lie. I am the one responsible for Elena's exile. Gasps rippled through the room. Damien's expression darkened, though he remained remarkably composed given the circumstances. You cost me 3 years with my children, he said quietly. You cost Elena 3 years of safety and support she deserved. You nearly cost this pack the chance to know its true heirs. Alpha, I. Save your explanations, Damien said, his voice firm and final. You are stripped of your position as beta, effective immediately. You will leave this pack by sunset, and you will not return. Marcus's face paled, but he did not argue further. Perhaps he understood that any further words would only worsen his situation. He left the room in silence, and shortly after, left the pack entirely, disappearing into the very storm that had brought Elena and her children back home. With Marcus gone, Damien turned his attention to rebuilding what had been broken. He formally announced Elena as his true mate before the entire pack, explaining the truth behind her exile and asking for the pack's understanding and support in welcoming her back. The pack, having already knelt before the twins in instinctive recognition, needed little convincing. Many of them had sensed something wrong with Elena's exile years ago, but had lacked the proof or the courage to speak against Marcus's accusations. Now, with the truth finally revealed, they welcomed Elena back with open arms and warm hearts. Arya and Cain were formally named as the pack's heirs, a decision met with celebration rather than concern. Their early strength, once a source of danger from rogue hunters, was now seen as a blessing, a sign of the pack's bright future. Word of the twins' recognition and Damien's renewed strength as Alpha King spread quickly beyond Redwood territory. The rogue wolves who had been hunting unclaimed shifter children reconsidered their plans upon learning that Arya and Cain were now under the full protection of one of the strongest packs in the region. Rather than risk conflict with a united and determined Alpha King, they retreated, seeking easier targets elsewhere. Weeks passed, and slowly, life within Redwood territory began to settle into a new, peaceful rhythm. Elena resumed her role as the pack's healer, her skills as valuable as ever, perhaps even more so now that she carried the added wisdom of 3 years of independent survival. Damien balanced his duties as Alpha King, with newfound joy as a father, spending every spare moment with his children, determined to make up for lost time. One evening, as the sun began to set over the pack house, Damien found Elena sitting on the porch, watching Arya and Cain play in the garden below. He sat beside her, taking her hand gently in his. "I should have fought harder for you," he said quietly. "I should have questioned the evidence more carefully. I let grief cloud my judgment, and it cost us years we can never get back." "We can't change the past," Elena said, leaning into him. "But we can make sure nothing like that ever happens again. We can make sure our children grow up knowing the truth, knowing they were never a secret to be ashamed of, but a blessing this pack fought to protect." Damien nodded, watching his children laugh as they chased each other through the garden, their small forms occasionally shifting into wolf pups before shifting back, their control still developing but their joy undeniable. "They're going to grow up strong," he said. "Stronger than either of us, probably." "Good," Elena said with a small smile. "This pack will need strong leaders someday, and they'll have both of us to guide them until then." As the sun continued to set, casting warm golden light across the pack house grounds, the Redwood pack settled into a sense of peace it had not known in years. The kneeling that had occurred upon Elena's return was not merely submission to power or bloodline. It was recognition of truth, of family, and of a future finally set right after years of hidden pain and unnecessary separation. Elena Voss had returned carrying secrets the Alpha King never knew existed, but in doing so, she had also brought healing, truth, and renewed strength to a pack that had needed all three. The scars of the past would remain, gentle reminders of lessons learned, but the future stretched ahead, bright and full of promise, for Elena, for Damien, and for the two remarkable children who would one day lead the pack their parents had fought so hard to reunite.